minutes between Rob and Trish. Are we good to go?
It's being recorded otherwise.
Okay. Oh, yeah. No, Trish just said in the chat, she said, yep, I'm here. So she's good. So we've got a recording secretary, and I know Rob is working with her. We'll do a formal introduction in a couple of minutes. But at this point, we'll call the meeting to order. I'm looking for approval of the agenda that was on our website. Can I get a mover and a seconder?
Sure.
I'll
Okay.
second it.
All right. Thank you very much. All those in favor, just need a random yay, hands up for those that have got screens on.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Looks good. We got enough for a majority vote in favor. Approval of the minutes that were presented as well. They're on the website. So I need a mover and a seconder if I can get one, please.
Yep.
Okay, got a mover, Gary, seconder, please. Oh,
Dave.
I got a few. I got Dave, I got Kent, I had a few. So excellent. And we'll make it much easier on myself. Those opposed, please reply. There being none that I can see, we're going to go with a unanimous on that one. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ian Farber to introduce our presenter for this evening. So Ian, over to you, if you would, please. Quick introduction.
Thank you, Bryce. Well, it's my pleasure to again welcome Dana Stahlman to the Kamloops Beekeeping Zoom meeting. Tonight, we're going to learn about bee biology and bee behavior, and that will help us when we get out into the beehives in a couple of months. I think we all enjoy working with bees, and tonight Dana's presentation will share with us the biology of the honeybee. And this is a very appropriate because there will be something in there in the presentation for everybody. I always say that I learn something from every course that I take, and I'm expecting to learn some information tonight. And I'd like to welcome a friend and mentor of the Kamloops Beekeepers Club, Dana Stahlman. Dana, thank you again for agreeing to present tonight. And without further ado, I'm not going to speak any longer than you are. So welcome, Dana.
Well, thank you. I am delighted to know about you guys, and I have something to learn from you as well. I live down here in North Carolina, where our climate is quite a bit different than yours as far as long periods where our bees can actually fly. And we have a very short winter here in Raleigh, North Carolina. In fact, if we get 1 inch of snow during the winter, we're kind of got people running around with their mouth open trying to catch snowdrops. And it's quite different, far different than the several feet of several feet of snow that you have. I used to live in Ohio, and they're also today sitting on about 2 feet of snow. They had a big snowstorm go through. You know, the topic, honeybee biology, is rather important for anybody keeping bees. If you know the honeybee, some of its rules, and honeybees certainly are survivors. They've survived for millions of years, basically because they are a organism. Many people think of a honeybee colony as something like an animal. An animal has certain organs and muscles and things of that sort to help the animal move and eat, that sort of thing. The honeybee is unique in the sense that it is called a superorganism. I attended a session at the North Carolina Vet College a month ago, and they have included honeybees with the veterinary college, basically because they're considering the honeybee almost like an animal. Each of the three kinds of bees function differently. They have different physical properties, and we're going to touch upon some of that. I will probably create some questions, and if there are some questions, I'll certainly take them, and you can decide whether it's at the end or during or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation. I just need to do something here. My screen is filled in. I'm going to just move it just a little bit. Okay. I'm going to skip this next slide. Essentially, in the United States, honeybees are considered livestock. So if you live in an area where honeybees or livestock, like chickens in people's backyard, or any livestock, honeybees are called livestock. So if livestock is prohibited, for example, in some cities, that includes honeybees. Our honeybees are not pure anymore. They're considered hybridized. So we might call honeybees Italian, we might call them Carniolan, but the fact is, these names that we use to identify various lines of bees really are quite interbred. And I'm curious about what's happening in Canada because we know that the honeybee is not native to North America, and certainly they have changed quite a bit over a period of time. As far as the honeybee is concerned, there's really two seasons. There's one where the honeybees are reproducing and growing clusters. And then there's another cycle where it's kind of the downside of that, where the bee population is reduced and the bees are preparing for winter survival. For us here in North Carolina, and probably for you too, the winter solstice kind of marks that period between the time when bees start to reproduce and then the summer solstice is when the decline starts. So in the winter, you're talking about your bees being covered in snow and everything. Things are going on in that hive. The bees can generate heat. The winter bees that are in your hive really survive longer than summer bees. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the fun I have with biology, because here in Ohio, we have oftentimes field events. We've got honeybees that know how to spell. We have honeybees that do bee races. We create artificial swarms, and all of it is based on biology, because we're going to probably pay a lot of attention to some of these traits that the honeybee displays. The year population cycle, we've got to remember that honeybees have adapted to areas in the tropics. They've adapted to the North Pole. I was actually in Dawson City in the Yukon Territory, and they've got bees there that do quite well during the summertime because you have long days. That is a factor in what bees work and how they more or less adapt to the area that they live in. I don't know how this population cycle affects you, but here in the States, it's pretty uniform that our highest population is in the beginning of summer, and then it declines rather rapidly. And I'm sorry. Is there a question?
No, sorry.
Okay.
I think it's just Joe didn't have his Mic muted.
Okay.
So
Then a little bit of history.
Oh, no red line?
The Aphis melliflora was introduced into the Western Hemisphere by settlers, explorers, and the honeybee adapted very quickly to the Western Hemisphere. In the United States, the bees could be followed across the United States as the population went westward. And the honeybee of that time was a little bit different than the honeybee that we have right now. Most of it was something called Dutch or German bee. It was a black bee, somewhat defensive, and also that bee had a habit of doing a lot of running on the comb and dropping off the comb at your feet if you were handling the bees. But behavior is based on what's called macro behavior, which means all the bees are working together. For example, in Honeybee Democracy, and I'd like to recommend this book by Tom Seeley, make good winter reading, talks about democracy in honeybees, deciding when they're going to requeen, supersede, when they abscond from a hive or they swarm from a hive. They've got a micro behavior, more or less an individual type of thing with communication. They do waggle dances and they butt heads, and they're quite good communicators. And I want to just read this because this superorganism is in fact a living organism. It's dynamic. It's not static. There's something going on in that hive all the time. If the queen is missing, the bees know it within a short period of time. So we're going to be talking a little bit about this honeybee as a superorganism because there's a number of interesting things going on. The classification of the honeybee, it's in the order of Hymenoptera, which includes bees, wasps, and ants. And in the United States, there's over 4,000 native bees, includes orchard bees and bumblebees. And many of the bees are very unique in the sense they have different colors. Some are green, and there's a whole bit of biology going in that direction. I'm sticking with the honeybee. There are 6 characteristics that you can easily identify on a honeybee. One is they have a lot of body hair. I mean, this bee is covered with hair, even on its eyes. It has unique legs. For example, the pollen holding areas on its body and the hairs on its body. Honeybee has legs that are combs that will move the pollen back to their pollen baskets. They have a nectar and pollen diet. Generations overlap. The queen lives for quite a period of time. The honeybees have a lifespan of something like 40 days, the books will tell you, but we know in the wintertime, that's a bit longer. They have a division of labor. There are bees, worker bees, as they mature, go through various stages of the tasks that they perform. They cooperate. It's interesting how this happens with brood care. And we're going to come back to some of these things later on. By the way, I don't know whether you can see my cursor on your screen, but this is the gland that most people see if the bee is out in front of the hive and there's a swarm and this bee is marching toward a hive with the queen inside. You know you have your swarm, and they will send out this scent that says, "Come here, I'm here." where queen is here. They also have pollen baskets that I want to point out. Very remarkable insect. In Europe, beekeepers, I know with England, if you take a test, in Ireland too, you can take a test, but you better know the anatomy of honeybee as a part of that test. This is a diagram of a honeybee and its organs inside. There are so many complicated mechanisms in this honeybee that you can't really spend 1 hour or 2 hours just talking about this honeybee, because when a person normally encounters the honeybee, they're looking at the antennae and the head and the eyes and paying particular attention to the sting. But every one of these parts has a name. It's just like taking a leg and you have a femur, for example. To the honeybee, they've got a tarsus, and the tarsus, let's see if I can get it right there, are out here. It's rather interesting of the even organs that are in this tarsus that can smell, pick up vibrations, and either climb on glass, for example. They do have a heart. The heart is located back here in the abdomen, and there are muscles and so forth that move the blood within the body. Now, they don't have blood like we have. They have a liquid that surrounds and floats around the various organs, providing them with oxygen. Honeybees have no ears, but they can detect vibrations. Any of you that have been around a hive of honeybees and tried to mow around it, they don't hear that, but they certainly feel it and they react to it. The really interesting thing is when you take a look at a very young honeybee, it's just covered with all kinds of hair. And as it matures and gets old, some of those hairs, like on the thorax, you can't see anymore. They have spiracles. I'm sorry, I've just gone too far on that one. They also release pheromones. These are smells that can be picked up by other honeybees. I've been told that a drone can pick up the queen pheromone smell when she's on a mating flight from a mile away. And if you've ever seen one of those vortexes that follow a queen when she's put into a little halter and they're filming her being mated, it's like a little comet of drones just following that queen so that they can mate with her. A lot of people said to me, well, there's a drone congregation area. The queen flies into that area and the drones pick up on her pheromones. And one of the interesting things about honeybees, as far as their reproduction, it's only the successful drones that carry the genetic materials that make the honeybees that do survive somewhat survival of the fittest. Let's take a look. Get my cursor down here. Let's take a look at the chemical messengers, the pheromones. There are a number of sensory cells called chemoreceptors on a honeybee. They can detect pheromones from a pretty good distance away, a lot better than dogs smelling. Jerry Bowmanchak, I don't know whether any of you know of him, from Montana, has been working with bees that sniff bombs and things of that sort. But for the most part, many of these receptors are located on the antennae of the honeybee. But as I mentioned, they do have sensors on their feet. The odors that they detect are shared with other bees by social contact. And we all know the queen pheromone. If the queen pheromone is missing from a hive, within 6 hours, probably the bees are starting to look for a young larva to replace the queen, because they know she's gone or something has happened to her. Another thing that happens, which is rather interesting, worker bees are females. And if this pheromone is missing, for example, the hive cannot replace the queen in a period of about 20 days, worker bees develop the ability to lay eggs, which are unique because those eggs are not fertilized. The worker bee has no organs to mate with, a drone. And so every egg that a worker bee lays is going to be a drone bee, because the egg she lays is not fertilized. Pheromones trigger various behaviors within the hive. For example, when bees gather at the entrance, they're checking to see whether there's a bee that can come in or a bee that's to be rejected. They are guarding the entrance. They're, find out who the enemy is, and they then will react accordingly. We tell people in the bee schools, don't wear hairspray into the bee yard. Some of the old bee books talk about people who have alcohol on their breath. They talk about cleanliness, a lot of things like that. You don't even see in bee books today. But the fact is, there are some people who just seem to attract the honeybee, and other people who walk through the bee yard and don't have any problem whatsoever with bees chasing them or whatever. Quick movements, for example, the honeybee eye is like a kaleidoscope. It sees movement. And if the person stands absolutely still, generally speaking, they're going to be ignored by the bee. If you start swatting at it, doing whatever, the honeybee is going to react. Now, these glands that the honeybee has are very unique. For example, worker bees have glands in their head that produce the royal jelly, and they provide the food if they're feeding young brood with food that they can process. They have the ability to create wax, beeswax, from glands that are in the abdomen. They have a poison gland, which everybody seems to be somewhat aware of, because honeybees can hand out punishment. You mess with them in the wrong sort of way, they can kind of just go at it, defending their hive. And the poison gland is, for many of us, if you're a brand new beekeeper, I would always advise a person to remove the stinger as quickly as possible, because that stinger as an organism is a shaft that has what I kind of forgot a word that I want to use, but barbs. It has barbs that work and kind of dig down into the skin. And in the process of doing that, it's also pumping this venom into your body. So it's good to know that if you are keeping bees, you've got to be aware of whether you are susceptible to the chemicals in this gland. If you are susceptible to bee stings, it's a good idea to probably either not keep bees or go to a doctor and have some probably treatment to build up resistance to that particular poison. Have you noticed that when a person is stung, that the bees seem to become more attentive to the part where you got stung? That again is pretty much controlled by a gland, and I've tried to pronounce this thing a number of times and messed it up, but Koschewa gland, and I know that's not the way to pronounce it, but that's going to be the chance that I take at it. Okay. This might be interesting to you. This is a chart in Tom Seeley's book, The Lives of Bees. And he's done a lot of research on the genetics of honeybees and what he's found. Now, this was taken of bees in New York State. Tom Seeley is a professor at Cornell University and has done a lot of work, kind of a follow-up to a lot of work that's done at Cornell over the many years. But notice, there's still quite a bit of German Dutch genetics in the bees that we have today. This area, this green area here, and down here, this was a study made in 1997. This was a study made in 2011. And this green area represents German Dutch black bees. The area that's in blue is the Italian and the Carniolan, quite a bit larger than all the others. There is still some Caucasia traces. These were bees introduced in the United States in the early 1900s. And then we've got Africanized bees. You'll see they're starting to show up here in the modern, the test that was done in 2011. And I would assume you don't really have to deal with the Africanized bee. I don't know for sure. But the genetic makeup shows that our bees are not really pure. They're hybrids of these bees that have been introduced into, in this case, the United States. And some will be yellow, some will be black, some will be gray. But for the most part, one honeybee can mate with another honeybee drone. If I have Carniolan, and I like Carniolans, the Carniolan is a black bee, and to my way of thinking, it is a bee that handles winters a little better than the Italian. The Italian just eats up a lot of food. But these characteristics are just spread throughout all of our bees. So when we start talking about the Russian bee is really a part of this Carniolan race. And by the way, you can trace the ancestry of honeybee because they do have a DNA. I've heard people say, oh, nobody would know whether my bee stung them or not. They couldn't really prove it. Well, I've got news for you. If somebody does take the stinger, they've been stung, and they get a DNA analysis from that stinger, they can find out if they want to test a number of hives, which hive provided the bee that stung them. It's quite a different world than we had 30, 40 years ago. Okay, now let's just take a real quick look at some comparisons. Let me ask, what is your favored queen or race in Canada, if we can call it a race? Is there any thought on that? We'll pick that up later, maybe. But here in the United States, we have so many choices because we have people who are breeding bees, Minnesota Hygienic, Marla Spavik, New World Carniolan. We can look at Sue Colby. the Russian hybrids that have been brought into the United States, the Varroa resistant strain, Cordovan. I don't know if you've ever seen the Cordovan Italian. But the
Looks like he froze up there.
Yeah, he froze. He came back for a second and then we lost him again. Have you got his contact, Mikhail? Can you pop him a quick note? I don't have it locally here, so.
Oh, he's probably going to log back on here because he
Yeah,
dropped his
Yeah, because
connection.
he dropped his slide deck as well, so I think he's just going to re-engage. So sorry about that, folks. Technology, welcome to virtual meetings.
While we're waiting, Ian, what kind of bees do we have here mostly?
Italian.
Well,
Italian?
Italian, a lot. If a beekeeper is getting bees, queen bees from Hawaii, then they could be carniolan. They're the darker colored bee. But I would say a mix between the Italian and the carniolan.
I don't have good luck with the Hawaiian queens. They always go back to Hawaii.
Yeah, well, they can travel. We can't.
Yeah.
It's a long flight though, Klaus.
I know, but obviously they like it better over there than here.
Or at least try, I guess.
Yes.
Yep.
I sent him a quick email.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mikhail. Appreciate that. We'll give him a couple of minutes. Looks like we got about 20, 21 people on now, so that part is great. Now, if we can just get the rest of our presentation wrapped up.
That would be good too.
Yeah, that would be really good.
Are you going anywhere, Bryce? I mean, looks like you're here for the stay.
Oh, yeah, I'm not going anywhere.
There you
I
go.
don't think we're going to be doing anything just yet. But I
Oh,
did get
you go to
away.
gyms next week. I
You're
think
going where?
you can go back into gyms again.
Yeah, we can go and
How's
work
that?
out. So I think they're gonna at least make an attempt at reopening them with a whole bunch of restrictions. But you know, the only thing we can hope is that this variant is mutating enough that eventually here it's going to get weak enough that it'll be highly contagious, but not a lot of teeth. So it's affecting us less and less. So
Yeah.
you know, it's the way nature takes care of it. I mean, viruses have to mutate because if they don't, they'll kill their host and they'll die. So they mutate to survive. But you know, we still have the Spanish flu. We still have the plague today. It's just it's mutated to the point where it doesn't have a lot of impact anymore. So we can only hope that that's what's happening to COVID. And is this the last one, or is there another one to come? I don't know, but at least I feel better about the downturn and the impact of it.
Yeah, so far.
Yeah, so far it's been good from that point of view.
I'm curious if anyone in Kamloops has experimented with like Varroa resistance in sort of like genetics, or I had a friend in Squamish who was trying to, oh, there we go, breed some queens for that.
Dana, we'll get you to load up again. So thanks for coming back on. We just had a question here that we're working on. You're muted anyway, Dana. But Ian, was there
Yes.
was there anybody in this area looking at that, the resistance? I remember at one meeting somebody was working on it, but I don't remember who that was.
I'm a bit jaded on this topic. because yes, there are people in the Kamloops area that are working on Varroa resistance. But from the information gathering I've done, a person wants to do that experimentation away from other beekeepers. Of my personal opinion, it is bad beekeeping to completely ignore Varroa treatments, because the beekeepers sets out to raise Varroa resistant bees, and it can lead to a mite bomb, which is when the hive is so overrun with Varroa that the Varroa laden bees leave the hive and look for safer ground in my beehives or your beehives. And so yes, Bonnie, people have done this. We first knew of Varroa coming into Canada probably, I think it was 1983, but we knew that Varroa would be coming from South America and United States. So researchers and scientists at the university level have been studying the problem. And my concern is, I would rather have my faith in people that are at the university level whose whole livelihood depends on researching Varroa than somebody down the street who has 2 or 20 beehives and says, hey, I can do this right in downtown Kamloops. It doesn't work that way. It's a really difficult concept, Bonnie, to understand how to breed bees that are resistant. And in British Columbia, we do have the hucksters in Grand Forks. They're super at what they do, but they take all the precautions and they don't spread the Varroa. So it's a very complex issue.
I think I got back on. I don't know what
Yeah.
happened to my connection, but it certainly just went off.
That's all good,
I-
Dana. We'll get you to load your presentation back up on share screen if you like, and we'll
Okay.
carry on. We just got into a sidebar conversation while we were waiting for you to reload. So thank you
Well,
for coming back on. And we understand, internet stability is not always the best. We lost our IT guy for a while, and his system is going down tonight too. So Mikhail is off and on tonight as well.
mhm. Okay, let me see if I can get my program back up. Something happened here. I don't know exactly what it was, but let me share the screen.
Hold on. Let me make sure you have it. There.
There yeah, it's got control now.
Okay.
Okay. Here's where I was. And
Yep.
I enjoyed that discussion you just had about the breeding of queens. I happen to be conflicted on Varroa mite. There isn't anything in my experience that has ever reached the point of a challenge as the Varroa mite. I don't care whether you're a new beekeeper or an experienced beekeeper. This is something that's going to challenge you for the rest of your life, because they're here to stay. And how we combat them is really the challenge. One thing I've discovered about, let's say, this biology is we could probably, and we've been working for over 20 years trying to create a bee that is resistant to Varroa. And certainly we might be able to work to it, but we're at a very great disadvantage. Any queens going out to mate are going to mate with drones, not necessarily the ones you choose. And if you take a queen that has been more or less artificially inseminated and is in a production program like the Saccatraz bee you have up there in Canada, there are almost half of those genes are lost when a virgin queen from that line goes out to mate in your neighborhood. You have no idea what she's mating with or anything else. And so if you have a nearby neighbor not treating for mites, not worrying about mites or whatever, it's pretty hard to raise queens. You just cannot do it without some control. And most of the queens that I see raised here in the United States are what I call production queens. It's just somebody raising queens, put into packages. And the person who ends up with that package, they don't really know what they've got. It's really disturbing to see that here in the United States, anybody can raise queens and sell queens and make whatever claims they want. When you say hucksters, they're all over the place.
No.
So, okay, the Carniolan bee I got down here. This is a bee native to East Central Europe. I don't know how much you've heard about Slovenia, but Slovenia has a really good breeding program for raising Carniolans. The only problem is we can't get them here in the United States, but they consume less food in the winter. I call it, they're good economists because they just don't, the queen just closes down on any kind of a drought or any kind of situation where there's no food coming into the hive. So they kind of raise brood based upon how much food is available. If food coming in is not available, they almost go broodless for a period of time. And this is an interesting thing. We have Africanized bees in the United States. Are you aware of any in Canada? No. Africanized bees are extremely aggressive, and their cell size is smaller than the normal European honeybee. And this is one of my business cards. I was a bee inspector here in the state of Ohio for a period of time, and we had this that we carried with us. It's kind of like a little gauge that would tell us whether if we came upon some bees that were really aggressive, we'd hold this up against the cells in the hive, and if they matched with this particular arrangement, then we called them Africanized bees, which, by the way, by law required their destruction. And this represented 5 cells to an inch, the European honeybee. And the only problem with Africanized bees is they do have good resistance and pest resistance because they abscond and swarm often. So if you have a hive that is excessive at swarming, probably it's going to have less of a problem with the mite. I do everything I can to prevent swarming, but it's one of those things that we sometimes have to decide what we're going to do. There are 3 types of individuals in a hive. This little illustration came from a book published in 1834, I think. But it's probably one of the best illustrations of honeybees that I've ever seen. It was a hand-drawn watercolor, and it is a beautiful illustration, but the queen, the worker bee, and the drone are pretty well illustrated. And I use that in almost all my illustrations, trying to show these 3 bees. The top 2 have 32 chromosomes. In other words, the queen has a father, the worker bee has a father. The drone has 16. It has no father. It has a grandfather. And I don't know whether that makes much sense to you, but this honeybee, which we call the drone, is really a flying gambit. It's got the genetic material of its mother. This bee can lay eggs. This queen can lay eggs, a lot of them. This bee has no stinger. It has no ability to lay eggs. It's not even equipped to go out and gather food. This bee depends entirely upon these bees to take care of it, which I think the genotype of the kinds of queens, if you're into queen rearing, you want the genotype from this queen and this bee to be carrying those genes that, let's say, are resistant to Varroa, if you're trying to raise Varroa resistant queens, which would then produce the worker bees that would have that characteristic. Workers are the most numerous and diverse and interesting, I think, in a whole hive of bees. They perform so many things going on in a hive. I have burned a couple beehives that had American foul brood. I don't know how many of you have ever done that, but here in the United States, we are required to, in many states, burn hives that have American foul brood. And we do that by digging a hole and setting the beehive and the frames with honeybees into that pit and then setting it on fire. It's always amazed me that the bees that are being burned up stay with the brood. They don't fly off and settle someplace like absconding. They stay with the hive and they're destroyed during that time that the hive is being burned. But you'll see the communication between two worker bees, the communication, they're constantly feeling each other with their antennae, they're exchanging food, they're wandering around carrying the queen pheromone. There's just a lot of things going on in that hive that this worker bee accomplishes. Besides, they are cleaning the nest, the hygienic behavior of bees. They defend the nest. They forage for food. They communicate food sources. This is a dance language. They have ovaries, which become active if there is no queen pheromone for a period of time. In fact, it is the worker bee that decides on many activities the hive will undertake. Tom Seeley, again at Cornell, has done a lot of work on swarms. And this book, Honeybee Democracy, more or less goes into the dance that the bees go through with scout bees that kind of go out, they look for a nesting site, they come back to the nest and they do their dance. And they have to convince, because there's so many scout bees out looking around, these scout bees come back and then they have to convince the other bees that this is the place that they should swarm to. And it has a lot to do with the size of the nest, the availability of the nest. And like I said, it's a book, if you have not read it, it'd be a good one to get a hold of. It's entertaining, easy reading. Okay, specialized structures of the worker honeybee. One remarkable adaptation is the ability of the honeybee to store pollen and carry it back to its hive. These are legs that are so specialized, almost no other insect has anything like this. It's got what we call pollen press. It's got front legs that'll move the pollen, remove it from their hair. We call these legs combs. Back to this particular pollen press. And then this bee flies back to the hive and deposits it in a cell. They have a proboscis, or some people say, I've always said proboscis, but proboscis. And this is very unique. It's shown over here in this slide where the bee has mandibles, it can chew, it can manipulate wax from its own body and work with other bees to build comb. The head is especially interesting The eyes of a honeybee are rather unique. A honeybee has what they call 5 eyes. It has 2 compound eyes, one here and one over here. Then it has, if you can see them very slightly, these are little bumps. These are called ocelli. And a lot of people think they have a lot to do with navigation purposes. But the eye of the honeybee is really unique. It's almost like looking through 1,000 little lenses. And what the honeybee sees is actually movement. They also detect color. They don't see just like we do. For the human eye, we see what's in this top bar. We see red, we see orange, yellow, green, bluish areas, violet. We don't see the ultraviolet range, but a honeybee is blind because red and black look the same. They see yellow, they see the blue range, the bluish green range, and the ultraviolet. And they have a relationship with many plants that they can see the colors within the plants that are attractive to them, which we cannot see. The thorax of a honeybee is really the locator segment. It's the segment that has the wings and the legs. I don't know whether you know it or not, but honeybees fly about 15 miles an hour. I don't know whether you've ever tried to follow a swarm or not, but I'm telling you, if you see a swarm leave your hive and they're booking it, so to speak, you won't be able to keep up with them. As fast as you can run, you're not going to stay with them for very long. They generally, when they swarm, will stop someplace fairly near the hive. And the reason for this is the queen weighs a little bit. She's reduced her egg laying before the swarm, but eventually she will find a branch to land on to rest, and the bees will gather around her. That is also kind of an interesting, there are photographs, movies made showing how these bees, these scout bees, lead that swarm off to the nesting site. The queen of the drone, there's been many experiments trying to figure out how we could get queens to mate with particular drones. Artificial insemination more or less solved that problem, but they can put the queen and drones into a greenhouse, and generally speaking, they're not successful mating. They mate, generally speaking, in the open air, probably somewhere in the area of the tops of trees. I mean, they don't do it near the ground. And the success of the queen depends entirely on the success she has with mating. Anybody have any idea how many times a queen mates? If you say 1 time, actually, we know by DNA analysis of the semen that's found in the queen that it could be as many as 20 different drones. This queen produces a pheromone which is very attractive to honeybees. I'm a former commercial beekeeper, and oftentimes we killed a lot of queens and replaced them with new, younger queens. And it's interesting, if I smash a queen like on the your truck, let's say your truck bed, you just smash a queen on the truck bed, within a very short period of time, you'll have a group of bees just gather around that spot where you smashed her, and they just act like a swarm. It's very attracting to honeybees that might be flying around in the bee yard. And if, like I've already pointed out, if it's missing, the honeybees go about trying to raise a new queen. The drone, by the way, is kind of as important. In fact, all three of these insects are important. The worker bees do primarily the work. The queen lays the eggs, and the drone provides the semen for the next generation. So I know beekeepers that try to get rid of drones. I've always been very fond of them. Put comb in hive with a starter strip, and the bees will build drone cells down from that starter strip. For those of you who are doing some natural cures for varroa mite, rather than buying frames with varroa mite cells, you could just take a regular frame, put a starter strip. I hope you know what a starter strip is. It's just a strip of foundation near the top bar, and the bees will most likely build drone cells down from that. And the honeybee decides whether they're going to have drones or not. It's usually the first sign of a swarm. If you see bees building drone cells, and you see young drones emerging from those cells, several weeks later, you'll have bees ready to swarm. This is a picture of the ovaries that's in this abdomen of a queen. The spermatheca is right here. And she stores the sperm in the spermatheca. The eggs that pass through the oviduct, which is right here, reach a point where the queen can fertilize the egg or let the egg pass unfertilized. And the valve fold, the area that the egg emerges from, and also, by the way, this is the area where, if you're going to inseminate the queen, you place your insemination needle, and this then provides sperm that would go into her spermatheca. I don't know whether there's been much discussion there about artificial insemination, but I've been exposed to it. I've done some artificial insemination, and it's really challenging to raise honeybees and keep a line going for any length of time. Queens can lay approximately 2,000 eggs a day. And just think about this, population growth. If this queen is laying 2,000 eggs a day, in 10 days, she's going to have 20,000 bees. In 20 days, how many is she going to have? In 30 days, how many is she going to have? 40 days, how many? Have you ever seen a hive with 80,000 bees? I mean, this thing is, she's just constantly laying. She may be inactive for a little period of time, but this queen is always attended by an escort of other bees, constantly grooming her, constantly providing her with food, and these bees, as they travel throughout the hive, carry that pheromone that we've been talking about, that queen pheromone. It's all she does, lays eggs. She can't gather food to feed her young. She can't go out and gather any honey. All that's done by the worker bees. And the male in the colony, I find a lot of old bee books just saying drones are worthless. They're not any good at all. Just get rid of them. Get rid of the comb. Do everything you can to get rid of those drones. Have you ever thought about this drone being responsible for all the females in the hive? For example, the drone provides the 16 chromosomes that join with the queen. These 16 add to this 16, give us 32 chromosomes for a worker or a queen. If it only has 16 chromosomes, it's unfertilized. They call this haploid and diploid. This queens and workers are diploid. Drones are called haploids. Now, the life cycle of a honeybee, and mostly if you're taking a bee school, this is probably the most important part of biology. If you know the cycle, the development cycle of a honeybee, if you go to a hive and you don't have any eggs in the hive, you can assume the queen has not been laying for 3 days. If you don't see any larvae in the hive, but you do see capped brood, you know the queen has not been there probably for 9 days. If you don't see any brood at all, most likely the queen hasn't been there for at least 21 days. And the reason why that's important is this is a picture of eggs. The age of an egg is interesting because if I look at my hive, if the egg is planted firmly in the center of the cell, facing straight up, that egg has been laid very recently. But as this egg ages into day 2, it starts to grow a little bit, but it starts leaning over, and by day 3, it's laying on its side in the bottom of the cell. So you can pretty much guess at the age of the egg 1 day, 2 days, and 3 days. And then a very important slide. Drones mature in a longer period, 24 days. Let's see if I can get my cursor here. Here it is. The drone in 24 days, worker bee 21 days, and a queen 16 days. And notice they're all an egg for the first 3 days. And then the larval development for the worker bee and the queen is almost the same, because when we look at a capped cell, we're looking at day 9 that the cell begins to become capped. This is a pre-pupa stage. Queen and worker, and then the drone. It's not capped until day 10 and 11. There's sometimes a little variation based on how warm it is. If it's cooler, they develop slower. But this is something that is almost on every bee test that you might take. The development of a drone, 24 days, the development of a worker, 21 days, and a queen, 16 days. And essentially what's happening is the bee is going through a process called metamorphosis. And it starts as an egg, becomes a larva, becomes a pupa, and then emerges from a cell. I learned when I was at Ohio State very quickly, you didn't say a bee hatches, eggs hatch. A bee emerges. I had Walter Rothenbuehler as a good teacher of mine. Walter Rothenbuehler worked with a guy by the name of Vic Thompson. 2 of them worked with the genetic makeup of hygienic bees back in the 1960s. But this is larva. This is what you'll see. Young larva developing. The larger the larva, the older it is. If it gets capped over, then it is in the process of becoming a pupa. I could spend quite a bit of time talking about this slide, but essentially, you'll see this process of a young larva being fed excessively with royal jelly. If it's going to become a queen, it is visited 4 or 5 times more than a worker cell would be visited to push this production, this development of this larva to become a queen. Notice when the cell is capped over, the pupa, we call this pre-pupa. The the larval stage, you can see the various stages and how this begins to shift to become an insect that has identifiable segments. I can take a queen, for example, and open up a queen cell. And by the way, there is a secret. You can actually open up a queen cell, make an incision inside of the cell, use a very sharp knife, check the age of this queen, because the first thing that you want to notice is a change in the color of eyes. You can almost, out of that period of a few days where she's going to be, before she emerges, a number of these features of the queen are visible. Eventually, the last thing that develops on a queen are her wings. So if you open up a cell, a queen cell, and she doesn't have wings, you know she's several days before developing into a fully adult queen. But the eyes of a queen just about to emerge are black. Prior to that, they can either be white or pink. And that's always found that interesting. Young bees that emerge from cells, like this little bee just emerging from this cell, and these bees chewing their way out of the cell, they work awful hard to get out of one of those cells. Have you ever watched that? And first thing these bees do is they go out and they start cleaning house. They begin, first of all, feeding young larvae. They constantly are attending to the queen, and then they go through various stages all the way up to the point that they defend the entrance to the hive. Now, we're going to very quickly, I'm taking a look at my watch here on time. I need to speed this up, I think, right? On warm days, as some of you have mentioned, there are signs of bees flying, oftentimes dead bees in the snow. The cluster itself in a tree is highly compacted. This is the cluster. The bees are raising brood and keeping this area warm, and the honey is usually above the nest. Winter temperatures, if we take a look at winter temperatures, you can buy sensors that you can put into a hive to tell what's going on inside of that hive. And when I talk about heat generation, there are bees constantly forming a mantle, and the heat generated in the center of that cluster is up to 92 degrees if they're raising brood. Worker bees build wax comb. This is a glandular development, which really the wax glands develop near the end of the development of a worker bee before it goes out of the hive and starts searching for food and nectar and honey. They will cluster like this, and they will form little ladders, and they will start building comb. And it's interesting, when they start building comb, they might have a section over here, a section here in the middle, and a section here where you've got 3 different groups, and yet they'll bring all those together, so you won't even see a separation in what a cell is. Drone comb is 4 cells to an inch. Worker cells are 5 cells to an inch. You can test this, just take your ruler with you to the bee yard and find some drone cells. Now, queen cells are quite a bit different. They look like peanuts. They hang down, downward. They're not built out parallel with the ground. They are vertical cells. And if you look into a newly started queen cell, you'll see a little larva, which the bees will feed and develop. I'm going just to go here through queen supersedure and swarming. Queen cells are built in two different places. Generally, they're built on the face of the comb. In some cases, they're built over worker comb, which would be a emergency queen cell. Emergency queen cells are built by worker bees over an existing worker cell that has a young larva in it. And it will be located generally on the outside of a cluster of eggs and larvae, more toward the outside edge. Honeybees swarm. They just rush out of the hive. It's like people getting out of work. They just push the guy ahead of them out and they just go crazy. Colony growth happens so fast that some people are caught off balance. And I'm going to suggest to you that every bee yard should have a swarm trap in it. Even if you don't think your bees are ready to swarm, if you put a swarm trap into your bee yards, you're going to get your swarm. Your neighbor isn't. If you've got a neighbor, in fact, I live here in Raleigh, and within a half mile where I live, there are 5 beekeepers. And I put up swarm traps and get their swarms all the time. And they're a day late, $1 short. Here we consider when a hive swarms, once those bees come onto my property, you can't come after them. They're mine. And the major cause for swarming is overcrowding. The bees need room, and because of this rapid increase in population, we get something called a congested brood nest, where there's no place for the queen to lay an egg, and the bees respond to that by just leaving. There's something interesting that I want to share with you about honeybees. I mentioned a bee race. Do any of you have any idea how to run a bee race? You know for a fact that when bees fly from a hive, they fix their location on that hive's location. If you move that hive 3 feet over, when they come back from the field, they go to where the old hive sat. Have you ever noticed that? Okay, when we run a bee race, what we do is we put a screen across the entrance, and we catch bees that have been out collecting pollen. We want bees that are foraging bees. They've been out of the hive, they're coming back to the hive. So we catch those bees, we put a tab on their thorax, like numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We get a kid that comes to the bee yard with their parents we usually have field days. And we want maybe 10 to 15 volunteers, and we call them our jockeys. And what we do is we take a worker bee that's been out flying, came back to the hive, and we put them into these easy beezy queen cages. I don't know whether you're familiar with those, but it's a plastic bee cage. We put those forager bees in that after we've marked every one of them, and we give these bees to children. Some adults even get involved in being jockeys, and we send them off about 2 or 3 football fields away from the hive. We then have a air horn that we send out a blast, which says to those jockeys, release your worker bee. Okay, those bees make a beeline right straight back to their hive, and we've got, of course, a screen wire across so no bees can get in. And the very first bee that gets back with a number on it is our winner. And it is really fun to show people how you use biology, because these bees are located on that hive. And if you want an event that will get their attention, it's infallible. If that beehive sits there for a couple of days and the bees have been foraging, I guarantee you, you take those bees a quarter mile away, half mile away, and release them, they're going right back to their home. immediately. They have very good navigational abilities. You want bees to sign your name? Would you like to have your name signed on comb? There's something called the Langstroth bee space. You can make a template which put a frame with new foundation in it next to your template. Your template is in reverse of numbers, and put it next to that frame. And what happens is the bees will always leave that 3/8 of an inch space, and they will actually spell your name out by going around the comb and pulling the comb out on a frame and never moving the comb further out so it comes in contact with your template. And so you can go to a bee meeting and say, look what I've got, my bees can spell. There's just so many neat things that can be done because you know the biology of the honeybee. Few last comments. What could you tell me about this queen cell? Queens don't
Rip-
like each other.
Yeah, ripped open.
Yeah. A worker bee did not do this. A queen bee came along, chewed out this section and stung the queen that was in the cell. This queen might have been 15 or 20 minutes younger than the queen that hatched, excuse me, the queen that emerged. And she went searching for her competitors. So a hive is only going to have one queen, unless there's something unusual like a supersedure queen who is being replaced by the bees. Her young daughter would come out, and maybe the mother and the daughter will be for a period of time in that hive, and you have two queens in that hive. But for the most part, there's only going to be one queen. These are some pictures showing a young queen emerging from a cell. Some beeswax that was started on a frame. You'll notice that bees work on a frame in groups. In other words, if you've got a small population of bees, they may start at different places on a frame. And there's one other interesting picture here. This cell right here also is a cell that has a problem. And those are generally cells with 3, 4, 5 eggs in them. What would that tell you?
Workers.
Tell you got a laying worker. In other words, generally speaking, you've either got a queen that didn't get mated and she becomes a laying worker queen, or it could be a worker bee that's laying eggs. Usually a queen laying eggs will place the eggs right in the center and the bottom. Laying worker bees, they'll be more not right directly in the center of the cell, but they will be scattered around because their abdomen is not as long as the queen. So if there are any questions, we can go ahead and take questions. I put most of you to sleep, I think.
No,
No,
I
it's
don't
very
think so.
interesting.
Yeah, no, it's great. And
Very
I'm
interesting.
sure there's a couple of people that'll have some questions. I'll just try and manage it a little bit so we don't end up with a lot of talk over. Is there anybody that had any questions to start off with?
I just wanted to comment about something that Dana said about the genetics, the hygienic genetics being lost. You know, when in I think there have been a lot of attempts in breeding hygienic queens, but I think he's right. I mean, the queens do mate with drones, and unless you have your own mating yard and you're really far away from anybody else, and you have a very controlled breeding program, you really don't have any control over the drones that your queen mates with. And a lot of commercial guys replace their queens every year, every 2 years. So those genetics, you know, unless you have an endless supply, will get lost. So yeah, I think varroa control is really important, maybe by other means.
I see most of your older beekeepers, so much of this lesson on biology is something that you probably know a lot about. I have raised queens. I developed two lines of queens. I call them Buckeye Bell and Buckeye Reb. When I sold in my business, I sold packaged bees in the spring of the year. I kept bees in Georgia and took them back to Ohio, where my home was. I actually had two homes, one in Georgia and one in the area near Columbus, Ohio. But people would ask me, well, what kind of queens am I getting in my packages? And they want to know a lot of details and sit around when they come get their package, spend a lot of time talking about, their queens. You got other customers to take care of, and time is kind of valuable. Well, the Buckeye Bell, I use stock from Joe Lackshaw. If you ever want to check a website out, check out Lackshaw Apiaries. If you want to spend $700 or more for a queen, you can go to that site and get a artificially inseminated queen that Joe has developed. Joe has a PhD in genetics from Arizona State University. He works for many of the commercial companies that sell queens. There's Hawaii queens. You can buy Lackshaw line bees. Joe works with many of the major commercial beekeepers who requeen every year. He actually goes to their facilities. For example, in Texas, we've got a very active bee business right now going on in California for the almond production for pollination. But many of those people over winter from North and South Dakota down to Texas, and they raise their own queens, but they are looking for queen stock that is resistant. And rather than pay $30 or $40 for a queen, they just raise, and I'm talking about a beekeeper that has 12,000 colonies. The Richard 80 in the United States has, the 80 family runs about 80,000 colonies of bees. And those guys do their own queen breeding and own queen production. And Joe specifically works with those people. He actually goes to their locations in Texas or Hawaii or wherever it happens to be, and artificially inseminates stock that they're using. And they end up then using this artificially inseminated stock to raise their own queens. And they are requeening every year. The general thought is a young queen will produce bees, more bees. The breeding process involves the drone and how many drones she is able to mate with, and the size or the number of sperm that she has in her spermatheca. So the more bees that she can produce, the better the honey crop's going to be, the more bees for pollination or whatever. So I don't quite like that idea of replacing queens every year. I've always gone with the idea that if I had a good queen, I wasn't going to kill her.
Do we have any other questions? Clubs? Sorry, Ian?
I had a question, but Dana already answered it about requeening every year.
Okay.
I don't like
I
that
just
fact
looked-
either.
Dana, I had a queen that was in her 5th year that actually was a descendant of somebody, a queen that I bought from somebody in Kamloops, of Lily Turner, her best queen descendant. And that queen was in her 5th year last year and was still laying like a hot damn. I don't know if she's going to make it through this winter, but.
Did you give their queen a name?
Well, she called her as Queenie. I keep track of where my queens come from, and I only get them from either my own hives or from Kamloops or Merritt. But No, I didn't name my queen. I just knew where she came from.
Well, I'll tell you, I raised queens, and if I had a queen like that, she got a name. And you don't kill queens that have a name.
Mhm.
It's like having a cow out in the pasture. You're going to eventually turn into meat, and you don't give those animals a name. And the same way with queens. I've had a few that I really felt bad when they died
Yeah.
or disappeared. I mean, it was a loss. The hive was still going, but the queen, all my queens were marked with numbered tags. And if I had a queen that had a numbered tag, I had quite a bit of information about that queen.
How do you attach a tag?
How do you attach the tag?
Yes.
You can buy little plastic tabs numbered from 1 to 99. They come in a various colors. And what you do is you use something called Tile Bond 2, which is a glue,
Mhm.
and you put a dot of glue on her thorax, and then you put this tag. Now, we're talking about something that's really little.
Yes.
So if you have a grafting needle, something that you can wet with your tongue and then place it on the tag, then you can move that tag over and put it on top of the glue that's on the thorax, and it will stick. It'll stay there for a long time. If you use a marking tool of some kind, sometimes those the paint will actually wear away. The tags don't.
Been there, done that, Dana. I did the same thing. Little blue and a little white or a colored tag that you set on their thorax.
Right.
Works good.
And you can buy them from some of the bee suppliers, but it's not really commonly available. You got to know where to go get them.
What are they called? Just bee tags or what? Or
I think Man Lake, for a hobby beekeeper and others, Man Lake sells
So
tags,
get
and I
them
think they're
them
just plain red.
Those
But
little tags,
these little tags.
marking queens.
no, I don't think so. I don't.
We used to have them available at our bee supply store in Edmonton, and I don't know if they still have them or not. That's the last place I saw them advertised.
I always had I had tags of all 5 colors, and I was getting them out of Austria, and I don't remember what that address was right now, but they get expensive. You can spend, if you were to get tags with 5 colors and 100 of each one, you'd probably have $30 in tags. I usually bought them when I had my business, 1,000 tags at a time. And it's, I don't know if you saw any tags in this presentation or not, but
I think you had some in the beginning.
on the opening sheet, the first sheet, this had the,
Number 22, I think it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, 22 was on the opening slide.
yes. And on the queen comparison chart, you saw one that had white and one that had the yellow. I generally separated them by years so you can tell how old they are. And that works pretty well. If you're going to have a queen live 2 or 3 years, if the queen comes up missing and you've got a queen without a mark, you know that the queen that you had is gone. She's been superseded most likely. And if you're really careful about raising queens and concerned about your bloodlines, you have to have some way of identifying the queen. And That's the easiest system I know.
Hmm.
And it really, if you can have what I use are German grafting needles. They are more like a small, thin darning needle, and they give you remarkable control over putting those tags onto the thorax of a honeybee.
Provided you've got a steady hand.
You know, I've noticed too, I'm going to just make another comment. I noticed that women seem to have the touch when it comes to working on grafting. I know some of the commercial people, and I always look at Marla Spadek with the Minnesota Hybrid. I know Marla and Sue Colby. She used to be at Ohio State. She's now up in Washington someplace. But there's room in the bee industry for women who want to work with queens and do grafting and develop lines of queens. They're very, very good at it.
I have a
They
question.
have more patience than we do.
Yeah. Okay, Ian, I just
Ian,
want to,
Ian here.
we've got some items on the agenda, so I want to take two more questions. Ian, go ahead, and then one more after that if there is somebody.
Okay, Dana, I have a comment and then I have a question.
Okay.
I have one of those Queen tab units. I left the meeting to find it, but it's misplaced. But a comment. You said that your neighbor beekeepers are not allowed to trespass in your apiary to get a swarm. Does that mean that they don't allow you to go into their apiary to follow a swarm?
That's correct. Once you cross a boundary line, once your property line, you're trespassing. I would now, if they gave me permission, then I could go. And
Okay,
you know, we as beekeepers are pretty friendly with each other.
yes,
And if a person is trying to follow a swarm and you say, "Hey, Joe, can I come over and get my swarm?" And he says, "Yeah, sure, come on over." You're okay. But if he says no,
right.
then
Okay,
then it's a problem. And I don't know, property rules, which they're old English property rules, and you read the old books about you could tang the bees down, and you could do a number of things. But the fact is, we don't have people shooting each other over a swarm.
no, they shoot each other over drugs.
Yeah.
Okay, have you ever used this product? It's called Swarm Command or
Yeah,
anything?
Swarm Commander.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anything similar to entice the swarm down into your equipment? And could you comment on the success of something like this, Swarm Command?
The Swarm Commander is it's got a formula. I don't know what the formula is, but a lot of essential oils and things like that. And, you know, banana peels, skins of lemon, they also are very attractive, but you know what is even better? Your old, dark brood comb in frames that you're getting rid of. You're pulling them out, culling your frames. If you take those frames and just hang them in trees or put a swarm trap up and just put those old combs into your swarm trap, they will get bees. Have any of you had supers sitting outside and end up with a swarm in your supers?
Nope.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Dana, in British Columbia, that would be an illegal practice. We're not allowed to leave comb out exposed,
Okay,
probably because of disease issues.
I
But
understand. I would
but-
understand that. Yeah.
but occasionally a beekeeper will leave a stack of supers out and there might be a small crack in the supers. And yes, that is a marvelous way to catch a swarm.
You
If
just
you're
have
close
to
to
find
it.
a way, right?
Yeah, and I don't think that's illegal because it's just a stacked pile of equipment. But if you do it with the purpose of catching a swarm, that might be technically illegal. But
Okay.
beekeepers always sort of run on that fine line between illegal and what works.
Mhm. Are you allowed to take well, let's say swarm traps that are kind of like pots that you put a tree into or something, it's kind of a fabricated swarm trap, and you use your swarm lure. The only problem with those kinds of swarm traps is if you get bees in them, they start belting comb, and then you've got to take the comb out and put it into a frame, either using rubber bands or some kind of string.
Yes.
But I would assume that would be okay because you're not using old comb, right?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Well,
Anybody?
I really appreciate being invited to be with you tonight. That's exciting to communicate with beekeepers and get some ideas from you as well. I'm kind of at that point where I've got a person who does a lot of my heavy lifting for me now. I certainly am still boss, but I can still go out there and work without having to pick up a deep super full of honey or anything like that. These younger people want to learn about beekeeping. I give them an opportunity.
Well, just before you go, Dana, I'm just going to turn over to Gary Martin to do a formal thanks from the club. So Gary?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
you betcha.
Well, thank you, Dan, for your time. It's always a privilege to have a commercial beekeeper take the time and share and teach us. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. There is no fee. I give a number of bee talks. In fact, this is the second one today. The most people here in Ohio, the talk, one of them was a Zoom meeting in Ohio, but most of us are just interested in what are the things we're going to be doing here in January. So, January management is the topic, not swarming or biology. Most of those things are reserved to the bee schools. So yeah, I thank you so very much. And anytime you need, if you need an emergency speaker or something, there's about 30 or 40 topics that I get involved in. And of course, I write a weekly newsletter that always keeps me pretty much in touch with what's going on a weekly basis. So I always set aside one day to do my bee notes and try to keep from procrastinating.
Well, that's great to know that you're exceptionally active and you've got that many topics. I'm sure that we'll lean in again, and Ian keeps us connected with some of the things you've got. So we'll look at some of those topics, and we'll be, I'm sure, taking you up on that offer. So
Okay,
thank
well,
you again.
Ian has been very helpful to me. I'll tell you that. And I'm
Excellent.
glad he considers me a friend. Okay.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your time this evening, and stay healthy and safe.
You bet. You take
Thank you.
care. I'm going to sign off.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye.
Okay, and we'll carry on with our meeting. Next item on our agenda, I will try to navigate through this agenda relatively quickly. We're already sitting at 8:20. I don't want this meeting to go much beyond a couple of hours maximum, but great session tonight with our presenter, and thanks again, Ian, for arranging that. Very helpful. So the next item is introduction of Trish. Trish, have you got a camera on tonight? Ah, there she is. Now you can turn your mic on. I just want to take the opportunity to introduce Trisha, who goes by Trish most of the time. She has graciously agreed to be our new secretary. So she's taking over from Rob and working with Rob on that transition. So Trisha, I'll give you a chance to say anything if you'd like to, but thank you for taking the role, and we're really pleased that you're here.
I'm excited to be here. I'm super excited to absorb all of your guys' knowledge because I am very, very new to beekeeping, but very enthusiastic about it. So,
yeah. Well, we appreciate it. And there's no other way to learn than to dive right in. So,
what I've heard, Bryce, it's what I've heard.
So again, thank you very much. So we look forward to having you with us at each of our meetings and going forward when you can. So if you've got questions, by all means, don't be afraid to ask any one of us, and we'll do our best to navigate you to the right individual or get you the answers.
Well, do really appreciate it, guys.
All right, thanks. Okay, next item, meetings. I just want to give you a quick update on that. As the board of directors, we had a quick conversation with regards to format of the meetings, and obviously with the Omicron variant being as aggressive as it is right now, virtual meetings will be the way we'll be staying for the immediate near future. We certainly would like to get into a face-to-face meeting environment. We do have the opportunity to use the university, and I know that'll also increase our attendance. A lot of people just are not comfortable with virtual. We also have a number of people in outlying areas where we just can't get a stable enough internet connection to make it work. So we'll forge towards that, but right now, unfortunately, we're going to be stuck in this virtual world for the next little bit. But hopefully, as spring comes on, we can get field days going and get some at least some outdoor connections going. So we will keep you informed. We'll post everything on the website. We'll do our best to get information to you as promptly as possible. So moving into committee reports. Governance is a vacant spot that we need to fill, but it's not high priority. Technology, I think we've lost our tech guy. I think Mikhail has unfortunately lost his connection again. So just looking to see.
I'm here.
Oh, there
I'm
you
here.
are. There you are. I see you now. I just flipped over to the other screen. Thanks. Thanks, Mikhail. All right, go ahead. I know you've been on and off, so.
Yeah, it's a flaky internet here.
Yeah.
It goes on all this cellular here. So in regards of technology, been some updates on the website to keep it to reflect the 2022. And I'm just running a blank otherwise. Oh, the MailChimp is set up properly now. So we do have, so we could, the Secretary Trish then, so we could email through that to our membership. So that's good. So that's kind of what I have so far.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for keeping us connected to the world right now. And we'll be looking for some people to assist with some communication pieces. So if there's somebody that's got an interest that wants to get involved in a little bit of writing and posting, Mikhail is certainly willing to work with those individuals. We don't have a communications chair right now. So anybody that has a little bit of interest to get involved, we would love to have you here. So Nancy, I see you've popped something up into the chat bar. So just an update on Western Apicultural Society mini conference that's happening tomorrow evening, and there's a link there for it. Was there anything else, Nancy? I think you're just by phone tonight because of your internet connection as well, right?
Yeah, I'm on by phone, but no, I just thought I'd pass it on to everybody.
That's great. Thanks. Anything else to do with the events or anything? I think that's probably the only thing coming up immediately, correct?
Well, yes, actually, I talked to Daniela about the CD Saturday, and they are planning on doing it on March 12th. And I thought we definitely should plan to do it. And if something happens with COVID, we can't do it, then we can stop. But if there's anybody that would like to volunteer also, that would be great. And they can contact me.
That's great.
And the day of the honeybee is May 29th, which would actually be the Saturday before the 28th. So I think we should just plan maybe to do that also at the farmer's market. And again, if they stop any demonstrations, then we can just not do it.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's great. Yeah, let's move forward on those. Dave, you had a comment?
Just a comment about CD Saturday. Oliver bought a whole bunch of seeds that we were going to give out at CD Saturday 2 years ago. They should be in the trailer, I believe. So
Okay.
that may be something to remember.
Okay,
And that's
thanks.
another thing. Where is the trailer now? I should probably know this.
Purity.
It's at Purity Feeds.
Oh,
It's in their
okay.
lock compound, and I've got a set of keys for it. And I believe they have a set at Purity as well, but I'm not positive of that. So
Okay,
Rob?
I'm
Rob might know. Rob, is there a set at Purity? Do you know when you drop the trailer there?
No, they don't have a set,
Okay,
but
so my set.
if anybody calls needing them without getting a key, I can give you the combination to the lock.
Excellent.
okay. I should
Thanks.
probably check out to see what's in there.
Yeah.
And I don't think Big Little Science Center has any of our stuff now, right?
Correct.
Not that I'm
Okay.
aware of. I think everything is in that
Okay.
trailer. Yeah. Yeah, we did go over there last year, so I think we've accumulated everything and put it all in there again.
Okay, Rob, I'll talk to you about the combination, I guess, then.
Okay,
Excellent.
Okay.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Nancy. Appreciate that. Joanne is not on tonight. I know fundraising has been a bit of a challenge, but we are working on some ideas around doing some things with a couple of local retailers where they buy bee-friendly plants, that kind of thing, and a contribution comes back to the club. So we're working with Purity as well as Art Nap and a couple of that way. So hopefully we can land on some ways of finding some passive fundraising without having to actually go out and do an event. Education, Ian, great job. Any updates there?
Yes, regarding the introductory bee course, it's still up in the air due to the Omicron. Right now, the center where we present is closed. It's going to be day by day, and it's not looking favorable for an introductory course in person this March, unless something changes. So that's the situation on the course. Personally, at the start of this meeting, my stress level was 20 out of 100. When Dana's internet connection went down, my stress level went between 50 and 90. Now it's back to 0, and it'll start to ramp up before the next educational one. So,
well, Ian,
I'm hanging in there, Bryce.
That's great. And you know what, Ian, never ever worry about that. I mean, we all understand, especially in a technology world that we're all in right now. I mean, technology fails occasionally and we move on and we'll figure it out. So never worry about that. It's beyond your control. So
Bryce, if you were at the university presenting to 50 students with your PowerPoint, or no, let's not say the university. If you were in an auditorium presenting to 50 students on some topic and your PowerPoint blew up, you'd be stress level 150 out of.
Yeah, I might go to 180.
Yeah.
I've been in that situation.
Yeah.
So I know how rapidly it ramps up.
Okay, that's it. We're out of time, so I'm going to shut up.
Okay. Well, thanks, Ian. I appreciate it and keep doing the great work.
Excellent presentation. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was good. It was really good. I always find it, always learn something. So it's amazing. Barb has asked a couple of questions in here. Just regarding calendars, I noticed that in the chat. There are no calendars this year, but Mikhail actually put together a small triangular one that he posted out. So yeah, he's holding it up. It gets lost in the background there. There you go, Mikhail. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a desktop one that you can put on the desk. I'll put it with the minutes, post on the website. It hasn't been posted yet, but I will do that. Well, look at that, much more nicer. Yes.
There you go.
There you go.
I
Thank you.
printed it off on some cardstock in my printer.
Yep.
And a little glue stick along the edge, which it's even got the glue tab for it. It's perfect. So
Beautiful.
there's a great
And we're
little
still
one.
looking-
Oh, sorry. Go
Sorry.
ahead.
I was going to say, we're still looking for photographs for next year's calendar.
Correct. And I just wanted to make that point. We did suspend it for this year, but what we're doing is we're going to be gathering photos, and we're going to actually look at running a photo contest here in the spring and summer. And we'll put up a couple of gift cards and those kinds of things so that, you know, the winner of the photo contest that contributes the most of them, we're going to swing a gift card your way for the thanks. So we'll be putting that up, and watch the website for that. That'll be coming up soon. And also, Barb had a question with regards to the password, Mikhail, to get onto the members only page. So Barb, I would suggest the best thing to do is just check in with Mikhail. He's the guy that keeps us loaded with technology. So he's the best guy to get you back onto that site.
But how do I reach him? Like, how do I contact him?
Webmaster@kamloops.beekeepers.com.
Okay, yes, I will do
Okay.
that. Thank you.
Yeah. So just use
Thank
the
you.
webmaster name. Yeah. So, all right. That's good. You're okay with that, Barb?
Yes.
I just
thank
didn't want to lose any of that chat stuff that was on the side. So, okay. We'll move on to treasurer's report, and then we'll swing over to Murray for the regional update.
Oh, we haven't done very much for money at all, so we still around 13,000 with a little bit extra in the kitty, so we're good to go. And it would be nice to see some money coming in, but again, there's lots of time this year to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We haven't had a whole lot of outflow, and all the bills are paid. So I think that's the most important thing for everybody in the club to know. And the budget was approved at the last meeting at the AGM, so we're in good shape, and we're forging forward for this year.
I gave you a finalized one for last year and the detailed version. They should be posted, if that's okay.
I believe
Yeah.
Mikhail did post them. I
Okay,
think
if
they
you
got
did, that's
posted
great.
already. Mikhail, did you post that last budget?
Not the very final one that was sent out a couple of days ago. I haven't gotten that one
okay.
up yet.
No, again, take the other ones off and put that one up. It would be good. Appreciate it.
Okay.
I will do that.
Nothing.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for keeping us accountable and paid up to date. It's appreciated. And Murray, regional report. I know we got some great stuff going on that level, and we've got a guest speaker coming to the board next session. So that's great.
Okay, perfect. Well, first of all, it's membership time. It's time to get the memberships in before the end of the month, so the club gets their kickback. So if you haven't joined, it's time to do that, because the club gets a kickback, and that's what the club's working on, right? There is help for those that were flooded. So if you know anybody that had beehives that were flooded out, apparently they don't pay 100%, but up to 70%. So if you know anybody that did have problems with hives, that is available. Tomorrow night there is another Zoom meeting through the BCHPA, and it is put on by the BC BBA, which is the BC Bee Breeders Association, and the guest speaker there is Ian Stepler. So it will be interesting when he's from Miami, Manitoba, and he's an interesting guy. We've had him at a couple of our meetings before, I think, and he's interesting. The other thing is the tech transfer is rolling. That might sound intimidating to some, and it says tech transfer, but it's really not. It's information for everybody, for every beekeeper. Like if there's a problem or a question, the tech transfer team can help you out, and they're connected with other tech transfer teams across Canada. So it's a good program, and we have actually a representative here in BC now. So it is a big plus for everybody, I think. And the semi-annual will be a Zoom only this year again. So that's the other thing that's coming in. I believe it's March the 12th. So that's about all I have for now.
Do you know whether it's a one-day format on that semi-annual, or is it going to be over a couple of days, Murray? I mean, it's not that crucial. If you don't have it, we'll get it posted to the site.
Yeah.
But
I would think it would be 2 days because the first day is usually the business and the next day is the presenters and stuff. So I would assume it's still going to be 2 days.
okay.
Murray, unless I'm wrong, Ken from Merritt said it was the 18th and 19th of March.
Okay. I thought I just seen it said the 12th, but I could be wrong too.
Well, I think that's what I wrote down anyway.
It'll be
and I
on
thought
the
that's what he
it'll
said.
be on the BCHPA website. So if you just go there, it'll be posted on their
Oh, yeah.
website. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also with the BC bee breeders, the last meeting that they had, there will be a video up there, YouTube up there. So if you missed it, you can catch up with it. And it's pretty simple. You just go on the Facebook, on their website, and you'll see BC bee breeders. Just click on it and it's pretty self-explanatory.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Murray. I
Well,
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Good
you're
job.
welcome.
The last meeting was quite interesting about the bee breeders, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And I think this one would be really good too with Ian, because he's a easy guy to follow too. He speaks in terms that everybody can understand. And
Yeah, I had a couple of answers. I found a couple of answers that I didn't know before on that
Jeez.
one. Yeah,
Hey, Joe,
couple new
that's-
things. I wondered about them, so, but I found the answers, so.
good.
That's good. When you're finding out stuff, Joe, it makes me feel great.
No, I still learn something new every time I talk to a beekeeper.
There
So
you
that
go.
saying that you can't teach an old dog new tricks isn't true.
Yeah,
That's right.
there you go. Joe's got some. I love it. All right. Anybody have any questions or anything before we wrap it up for tonight? Comments, questions? Open it up to those that are online. It's got more head shaking than nodding, so I'm assuming everybody's just looking for that damn motion for adjournment. So at this point, you'll notice the next meetings, they're posted there for you. I'll look forward to seeing the board of directors on the 15th of February. That means you too, Trish, because you're going to be recording. And the next general meeting, of course, for all of us is going to be on March 15th.